So, dear colleagues, thanks for joining us. We're just giving one more minute for everyone to settle down. Welcome to the LGMA monthly webinars delivered by ICLE in its capacity as the focal point. After enabling everyone to settle down, we will kick off. So I think we can go ahead. So welcome, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies, colleagues, and gentlemen, all joining us in this monthly webinar of the Local Governments and Municipal Authorities Constituency towards the Conference of Parties, annual Conference of Parties, which will be the 28th one this year in December in Dubai. My name is Yunus Arakan. I'm the Director of Global Advocacy at ICLE, Local Governments for Sustainability. And ICLE and me personally we are also the focal point of the LGMA constituency, which comprises of around 50 organizations globally who are accredited to UNFCCC. Before going further into details, just a reminder that these sessions are recorded. You are encouraged to type your questions in the Q&A or chat box during the presentation, but we recommend you to let us go through the presentations until the end, and that we can then have a more holistic discussion on the topics. And the presentation is also shared later on the web, on the YouTube, and as well as the presentation as well. And this is repeated also, the context wise, it's repeated in the afternoon according to the European time zone, in order to enable the colleagues in the Eastern Hemisphere, Western Hemisphere also joining us. Obviously, because of the timing, there may be changes in terms of the speakers in each of those. Today, we are really delighted that we will welcome Alison Gilliland, Dublin City Councillor, from the Committee of the Regions COP27 rapporteur, as in her capacity, who joined us at COP27 delegation. I'm not sure whether you can see her in this photo, but she also joined, especially the Copenhagen Ministerial this month, and we have invited her to share her experience. I think she would be joining around the let's say half an hour of this call. So we will invite her, incorporate her into the program. I'm also very happy my colleague Ingrid Kotze from ICLE Cities Biodiversity Center will also be joining us to give us some updates about the biodiversity related negotiations. So according to our agenda today, we will have a basic LGMA intro for those who are new. It may be repetitive, so for some of the colleagues, but I think it's always good to remind ourselves who we are, what are our tools of engagement. We will go through the COP28 roadmap, our roadmap. There are more now clarifications on that. We'll share more updates. We will go through what has happened since our last webinar, which is our traditional agenda. Actually, in the first 2 months, in January and February, we tried to gather our strategy and an agenda. Now it's very clear, so we will be able to now map what has happened and how we can prepare. As we said, we will hear reflections from Alison Gilliland. I will spend some time on the stocktake for climate emergency, which is an evolving agenda, which is really exciting for all of us. And we will conclude by upcoming events. As I said, I will invite Ingrid also to share updates on especially the Ramsar Convention. This year they will have their COP14, and there's an agenda for cities or some nations as well. So let's proceed. Before going further, I remember in our February webinar, it was just a kind of 10 days after the big earthquake in Turkey, impacting Turkey and Syria, and we have announced the call for solidarity from Izmir mayor. And in fact, on the 22nd of February, there was an interesting experience, and the LGMA delegation from ICLE, Eurocities, UCLG, demonstrated strong support. It was an interesting, innovative approach. They have compiled a crowdsourcing experience. So that was at least a concrete response how we can demonstrate our solidarity with our colleagues in anywhere in the world. However, just a couple of days before of this webinar, which is around one month after the disasters in Turkey and Syria, another disaster hit another city and region, and of course, so many of them, especially Cyclone Freddy hit, and it's recognized as one of the longest lasting cyclones in the history. It was lasted for more than a month, and it had twice in 10 days downpour in the coast of Mozambique and Malawi. Obviously, there are so many cities in those lines, in those trajectory of the cyclone, but one of them is someone that is very close to ICLE and LGMA constituency, Mayor Manuel Araujo, mayor of Calimane. He made an appeal. He was already alerting us when the cyclone hit his city. He was cut off from communications, and it was a huge disaster. His appeal was very, very also touching. He was saying that if I need support, how can I support the ones who are needing my support to them, the local leaders? So he was really pleading for all the partners. It's a pity. Unlike a mayor of Izmir, who he did not have resources or opportunities, as we said, the situation in Izmir was a bit different. The earthquake was in a different zone in Turkey, so Mayor Soyer was able to support, but Mayor Araujo was simply left alone. In response, ICLE Africa Secretariat has announced a fund to support him. Those who are interested or are available to support this fund, they are also welcome to join us. Unfortunately, it is very clear that such announcements will come more and more, and that's exactly the discussion we will have in the disaster framework, the Sendai framework, but also loss and damage, which is our concrete cases now we're seeing everywhere in the world. So let's proceed, and we express once again our solidarity to Mayor Araujo and all his staff and his people suffering in these difficult times. Who is LGMA? Who is part of it, and what are we doing? This is the accreditation process of local and regional government networks to the UNFCCC. Since '95, we are there. We're one of the first constituencies along these lines. Since '95, we're active in the space. There are four main areas of activities we're involved in. First of all, we are trying to influence the negotiations agenda by submitting our interventions or inputs. We are part of the action agenda, which is an agenda concept that is evolved since Paris Agreement, which is not a negotiation agenda, but much more delivery of the Paris Agreement. Of course, we contribute to the preparations of the presidency, the COP presidencies, and the challenges that every year they are changing. They have recruiting new teams. Unfortunately, for any country who is hosting such a COP, it's a big mandate. It's a big agenda. It takes huge time and effort. They go through the year and the preparation. They host the COP, and then they start to fade out. That because the next COP presidency is coming up. So in that sense, it is also a challenge for us because they usually have their own priorities and their styles and mechanisms. They don't need to be bounded by the UNFCCC process, but we are very happy as LGMA. We have always been engaged with the presidencies throughout this history, and we will hopefully continue to do so. The same goes to this year as well. And finally, of course, the secretariat, the presidency, but also we have parties to the UNFCCC negotiations, and they are the ones who decide on agreements. They are the ones who put text on the table, and therefore we have to improve our relations, and that's why we are having this UNFCCC Friends of Multi-Level Action, which are the countries who support the multi-level action at home and at the UNFCCC process. And let's be also realistic, this group of countries can also be changing according to time. There are some countries who are favorable of this concept, but depending on the political agenda, they may change. There might be ups and downs. So let's be realistic on that. We told about our tools. The webinars for us has been in practice for, I think, since 2000. 16, I don't remember when exactly we were having this monthly webinars. I think we always have enjoyed this benefit, and it was for us even before COVID came. So we have always been using the virtual connections in our process. We were aware, we have been circulating our email updates to our LGMA constituency, but they were more like internal documents. We thought it will be time to make some of those information available. Therefore, we kicked off LGMA monthly bulletin series. The first versions were already available for February, and the March version was released just last week. So we are encouraging all our partners to subscribe themselves into this bulletin, so that they can track and even share publicly the information. And it is also open for contributions from all the LGMA constituency members. I assume now Kata has put the link into the chat box, and this is really for us is a valuable tool in order to keep our momentum, especially in the change of the modality that now that the COP26 and COP27 is concluded, the work at home is more important or equally important than the outcome of the COP. Therefore, we really encourage you to populate this information, disseminate these messages, and make sure that this is making us heard worldwide. And I see in the chat box Eva from CMR is also sending her complimentary messages. We appreciate these positive feedbacks, which is encouraging us, and therefore we look forward to your support in both enriching the bulletins, but also disseminating worldwide. Next, as we said, we had been working over the past couple of weeks with you in terms of tracking what could be the tentative, let's say, highlights of our agenda for COP28. I'm very happy that we now are able to map the most relevant ones. As you can see here, you can see in color codes and monthly schedule the UN and UNFCCC events, the global and national events, which are the ones who do not necessarily follow the UN procedures, and in the red lines you can see the LGMA agenda. As we said, this compiles around 20 events at the moment, and we're also aware new ones are coming. Some of them are important, some of them are less important. Therefore, at the LGMA website, we will also try to keep a track of the complete list. But from now on, as you have seen, the major events are starting on March onwards. Therefore, we will now be able to track more carefully about what is coming up, what will be our topics in the next couple of weeks, and how we track our success and our achievements in this process. In that regard, I recommend us to be aware of keeping us informed. This chart is also available in the LGMA bulletins as well. And you will notice that in the LGMA bulletins, we will try to capture what has been available from the LGMA in all these processes, so that you can easily track and share what has happened. Now we are preparing for the COP28. Let's remember what has been our key takeaways from COP27, Sharm el-Sheikh. What we are suggesting that, first of all, the first good thing that is coming up is that the second phase of the Paris Agreement is now officially designed. So the design phase is over. The design phase comprises of what is achieved in Glasgow, but also in Sharm el-Sheikh. Glasgow much more focusing on ambition, because there were new NDCs, there were so many announcements like Race to Zero, Race to Resilience. And COP27, Sharm el-Sheikh, it was the first Global South hosted COP after 6 years. Obviously, it was addressing climate justice. And with the agreement on loss and damage, I think we can comfortably say that now the second phase of the Paris Agreement, which is much more holistic, inclusive, and robust, is ready. And yes, of course, there will be still in negotiations, and the Article 6.8, these mechanisms will still be discussed, but the bulk of the work is at the moment does not need a COP decision to guide us, but rather it is now our mandate to deliver what is agreed in Glasgow and in Sharm el-Sheikh, and especially being encouraged that multi-level action is the new normal here, and especially the main discussions will focus on governance, capacity building, and finance. So that is the good thing. The second thing, essential, especially for us, is that, as we said, in the second phase, we are calling that the multi-level collaboration is the new normal. This is something different than the first phase of the Paris Agreement. In the Paris Agreement, it was still, we were acknowledged as important partners, but in the Glasgow Climate Pact, we are recognized as multi-level action, as the urgent need. And we have seen this in so many initiatives, from the US to Japan, from EU to the surge, and climate and urbanization ministerial, or other processes. Both sustainable urbanization as a theme, as a sector, and multi-level action is becoming now the new normal. And that is something that we are saying that we cannot ignore this, and this is really the essential building block. And the third, it's also clear, the UNFCCC and COP engagement, after especially this new second phase, which is different than the first one, cannot continue with this format anymore. It has to be really recalibrated with the real needs. And obviously, having thousands of people mobilizing for 2 weeks, is it really what we need now? Is it really helping us to reach to our goals? And in the age of digitalization, do we really need this? It's very likely that COP28 will still be the agenda for a typical COP engagement in the past, but it is highly likely that there will be, and we are seeing this in the workshops, in the UNFCCC, in outsides, the way COPs are designed, the role that Bonn conference in the mid-year, they will all have to be readjusted and be reflected to the realities and the needs of the new world we are living in. Therefore, the inevitable is that the COPs cannot continue with this way of that we had in the past. So that is just an information for all of us, and we have to also contribute into this process. For this year, over these weeks, we have collectively discussed what is our priority. First of all, the surge is an important initiative that is, for us, literally is an opportunity to deliver the multi-level action. It's an opportunity to deliver all our commitments through multi-level collaboration. The Secretariat, UN Habitat, and ICLE, we have been talking with the presidencies in order to shape this process in the next couple of weeks much better. There will be soon announcements from the UN Habitat as the main lead of this process, and ICLE as supporting the Secretariat. It's also connected to the Urbanization Climate Ministerial. The report, the draft report, is soon to be published. And in that sense, this year will also be important because we have the UN Habitat Second Assembly in Nairobi, and this overlapping with the UN conference in Bonn, UNFCCC conference in Bonn. In fact, the UN Habitat Assembly is convening every 4 years. Therefore, the outcomes are much more strategic. Therefore, it is an opportunity for us to position this to the urban community that in the climate space, we have created a huge now opportunity, and UN Habitat should, and UN Habitat community should also embrace this. In fact, it was a follow-up from what they have kicked off at the executive board meeting 2 years ago, actually 1 year ago. And one good news is that yesterday I delivered an intervention in the executive board meeting to honor what they have contributed in this process. So that is something we will work on it, but it takes, of course, its own mechanisms. It is because of the engagement we have, that it has to follow some UN practices, and it has to be connected with the champions and the presidencies. So the process is not fully in our hands. That's the reality that we should be aware of. The second thing that we should be involved is the stocktake, which is the local and subnational inputs to the global stocktake. I will go through it in more details because we have a long agenda there. But the advantage and the opportunity is that for spreading the stocktake at the local and regional level across the world, we don't have to wait for surge, or we don't have to wait for urbanization ministerial to be decided. These are independent processes, and in fact, even they can help and complement each other. That's why we do not see this as competing agendas, but in fact, complementary agendas. And finally, The third final point is that we have to accelerate our contributions to the UNFCCC text developments, submissions, and meetings. And in that sense, we are also making progress. We will see what has happened over the past couple of weeks. But let's remember, we will start to revisit our golden opportunity to use the ICLEI's presence in Bonn that we had in the past benefited a lot through our Residencies Congress in between 2010 and 2020. Since 2020, we had this process virtually because of the COVID. But starting from this year, Daring Cities, the new brand, is giving us the opportunity that we can shape or influence the discussions during the June sessions here in Bonn, or the June conference in Bonn. This will be an opportunity for us to shape the outcomes at COP28 and in the COP28 space. And that's what we have been learning since weeks. Our experience with the multi-level action pavilion in the blue zone in Glasgow and Sharm el-Sheikh, it is clear that we have to continue. No matter how much it costs, we have to secure our space. And the good news is that there are more updates coming from the president as well. This, we do not have to spend too much time. This was a chart that we have already been following since January. In fact, the COP28 presidency is already very clearly going ahead on some of the activities, and we will touch upon this some outcomes the last couple of weeks. One important point that we always want to emphasize, of course, you are aware that in the global debate, there is a discussion about the role of the COP28 presidency, His Excellency Al Jaber, in relation to his role as the CEO of the ADNOC, the National Oil and Gas Company. However, he's also at the same time CEO of the Masdar City. We will not give up to emphasize how important such a role is relevant for COP28 agenda and for LGMA. Therefore, hopefully, because we are advancing with all our dialogues with the presidency, this may come up stronger, and this may also be influencing the way champions are also addressing our work, that this multi-level action is a key aspect. I will spend some time here. I'm just being conscious of the time. I think Councillor Gillard has still not joined us. Probably he may be coming soon. Okay, good. Alison Gillard, Councillor of Dublin, has just joined us. I'm very happy. Kata, by the way, if you can help us to revise her name so that she's not referred as Yunus Arikan. It's a technical issue. Alison, Councillor Gillard, just a couple of minutes, if I may, and let me go through the progress since. And as you can see in this slide, I have particularly highlighted your intervention as red, so that let me go through this, and then I will give you the floor so that we can hear your experience, and you are also now appropriately acknowledged as Alison Gilliland. So,
thank you.
Gilliland, excellent. So, what has happened since our webinar? It was 16th of February. As we have recalled, we are following the three axes: the UN and UNFCCC agenda, the global and national agenda, and LGMA agenda. In the UN space, the most important thing we should be aware is that on the 9th of March, there was an announcement by Bloomberg and COP28 presidency. The announcement comes with a proposal or a commitment that there will be engagement to the Leaders Summit. More mayors will be invited at the beginning of COP, and there will be certain activities or capacity building in collaboration with C40, GCOM, Under 2 Coalition, and America is All In campaign or process. Therefore, we will be stay tuned for updates from our partners on what does this mean, and as well as COP28 presidency. But what we can address, because Chefchaouen Mayor Sefiani, who was already with us at COP27 because of his role in the LGMA, he prepared his speech. He was not able to interact in this call between presidency and COP28 presidency and Bloomberg, towards C40 steering committee and GCOM board mayors, but at least we have communicated his input to this dialogue in written form to the presidency, and he highlighted three main things, which is consistent with our LGMA strategy. First of all, we would encourage COP28 presidency, His Excellency, to recall his role as Masdar City CEO. This is an important opportunity for us, and we want this to be more visible. Second, we ask his support to confirm the COP28 will convene the Urbanization Climate Ministerial again. Third, we asked his support for the COP28 Blue Zone LGMA Multi-Level Action Pavilion. The presidency is considering to support some constituencies, and we want it also include this LGMA as well, and we're receiving positive feedbacks. The UNFCCC Loss and Damage Transitional Committee met. Actually, it was just a couple of days ago. We unfortunately weren't able to nominate LGMA speakers in person. We did our best, but it was not possible. We will hopefully have more representation in the future. Regional climates were announced. That will happen in September and October in Africa, Middle East and North Africa, and Latin America. Asia Pacific will be announced soon. We will go to the Copenhagen Climate Ministerial in a couple of minutes. UN Water Conference was hosted. It did not completely resulted in an agreement, but there were more than 700 initiatives, and there were strong LGMA presence as well. AR6, the IPCC has released their synthesis report. The interesting thing is that the summary for urban policymakers of the synthesis report was already released by the Global Covenant of Mayors and our partners at COP27. So the urban summary was much more advanced than the national summary. This is important because we have to now make this now much more spread. And in that sense, what I noticed as a bird's eye view, the summary for policymakers, of course, it refers to the urban elements, the urban dimensions. But as far as I noticed, for the first time in the IPCC synthesis report or summary for urban policy, summary for national policymakers, there is a reference to multi-level action. Maybe we should make use of this. I will try to track the exact line for that, but it is important. And if there's anyone who has noticed this, you can also share with us. At the global and national level, the Japanese Zero Carbon City International Forum was hosted by Minister of Environment of Japan, as well as the US subnational diplomacy representative Nina Hechigan. UNFCCC Executive Secretary also addressed this this event. It was also, of course, an opportunity for us. From LGMA side, back to the Zero Carbon Forum, we hosted the Urban 7 Mayor Summit, and the declaration was released, which had strong elements to COP27 outcomes and surge. The G7 will play a huge role, hopefully, to bring this on the table in the Habitat Assembly and COP28. Scottish government released a very important report on the good practice on how subnational action could be empowering the loss and damage agenda. And for the LGMA adaptation, Committee of the Regions and Regions for submitted a position paper, and which will help us to improve further. So with this in mind, one of the important agendas was that the Copenhagen, the Danish Minister of Environment has started to put this as like an annual event that every year around March, they convene a ministerial dialogue, the climate ministerial, informal, to prepare the rest of the year's agenda. As we said, this is informal, but it's of course good for interaction. And the Danish government has always been very positive, together with the COP presidencies, to invite observers. We had one seat for every COP observer constituency, and we are delighted. Alison Gilliland has represented LGMA in this process. So it was 2 days meetings. It was a very intense. I know, Alison, you had made several interventions. So we would be, of course, sharing also in written forms later on with the bulletin and others. But we would like to hear from you. What was your observations in the way the dialogue was held among ministers, but also how do they approach to your interventions as local and regional governments? What was their feedbacks, and were there any critical message that you take away for us to take into account in the next couple of weeks? The floor is yours, and once again, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Yanis, and good morning, everybody. Yeah, and I really appreciated the trust that was put in me to represent the LGMA constituency in Copenhagen. Yeah, it was very insightful. I'd say there was about maybe 60, 65 of the parties there. Commissioner Timmermans represented the EU, and there were several other individual EU countries. Some of the further flung countries were represented by ambassadors that were in Denmark and other European countries. So there was obviously the introductory plenary set the scene. It was probably not coincidental that it coincided with the publication of the IPCC report. And I think that very much focused minds. We had a short presentation on that report that basically showed how so far off target we were. Then there were 4 breakout sessions, one in each of the key issues: mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage, and finance. And I was able to intervene at each of those and, I suppose, put forward our message that local government need to be supported. We're at the coalface, pardon the pun. And of all the countries that, I suppose, acknowledged that intervention, it was probably those in the more developing countries, because I think they can really empathize with us because they are experience the impact of climate change here and now. I was very conscious of Commissioner Timmermans' presence when I was in the loss and damage and the finance piece. So very much speaking to European initiatives such as the Mission Cities, because I do think that's a really good example. And my own city, Dublin, is one of how expertise and finance can be channeled directly into a city at local level. Emphasised the need to support the Surge initiative, and also I expressed how beneficial we found the climate and urbanisation ministerial at COP27, and that we wanted to see that. I suppose picking up on our other constituencies, our other non-party stakeholders, that we are at the fore when it comes to knowing our context and knowing our people, regard to gender inclusion, disability, working people, all of that, and actually made a very good connection with the trade union representative. I have a trade union background, so we spoke about just transition and the need for transition at a local level. So overall, from a reflection, I think there were a few things that very much struck me. One was around finance, and part of the conversation was around how can we, I suppose, explore more innovative financing sources. And there was a suggestion of aviation tax, maritime trading tax, so sort of targeting the big emitters from an industry or a sector perspective. There was also, I suppose, putting it out there by one of the countries, particularly Switzerland, that we really needed to move away from the traditional developing countries, the historical responsibility piece, as they were viewed as having, they were inhibiting progress. And I suppose that speaks very much to China, Indonesia, some of the G20 countries. But what was, I suppose, most pertinent from me as a European was Commissioner Timmermans' intervention, when he stated very, very clearly with regard to loss and damage funds. And I really felt for the Maldivian minister who was sitting straight opposite him, but I was also conscious that China was in the room with us, that there would be no agreements on loss and damage financing unless there was higher ambition when it came to mitigation. And that, for him, he said, basically, we gave in last year on that. So I would envisage there'll be a big argument at COP28 around phasing out coal and other high emitting fossil fuels. And he was very, very clear on that. Then from the global stocktake, that was actually really, really interesting. Huge emphasis on nations really engaging with this, that we have the IPCC report. We now need to know where everybody stands, what they're doing, what they're not doing, where the gaps are, how actions were being financed, so that we would get examples. And there was very much a sense that we needed to move from the abstract to the concrete. And I think we know we can really contribute to that piece. There was an emphasis also about engagement with non-party stakeholders around the global stocktake. And I know Yanis Eatley have a very good town hall plan that was mentioned. But my intuition would judge that they're very much interested in engagement with the business community, with trade, with industry, both from the innovative finance sourcing perspective, but also from, they mentioned quite a few times, sector transitional plans. And I think what they're aiming at is to work with the big industries to see how they can be helped transition to a low carbon way of operating. And I would fear that that might exclude what communities are doing, what local authorities are doing, because obviously money talks. And if you can get some of those key big players, and I suppose we're all conscious that at COP you also have the big players from an economic perspective there. They did mention engaging more with non-party stakeholders in the blue zone, which was, I was saying, like, you know, you're welcome anytime to come over. But I think they want, and this speaks to the multi-level piece. And again, I have that business thing at the back of my head from what they were saying, because too many of them referenced the business community. But I think that's an opportunity for us to be proactive, to reach out and to invite them in that context of global stock take. So I think that's an opportunity for us. Yeah, that's more or less it's very much, yeah, the G7, the G20 countries that very much encourage that they need to get it proactively on their agenda and to dig deep on what they were doing. So yeah, key messages I think that we can take advantage of, but also ones that I think we need to have at the back of our mind with regard to a few red lights. So I hope that's of use, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Excellent. Yeah, especially if you have a couple of more minutes to join us.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely. I'm here for the rest of the seminar.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent. I think, especially now, I will try to take us through the stock take discussion, which could also be helpful, but I would be very happy. But maybe now we can already mention that your role inside the Committee of the Regions also this year will continue. You will be part of the delegation, as far as I know. And Committee of the Regions, our colleagues are also joining us in this call. There will be several meetings coming up. Traditionally, there will be a rapporteur this year as mayor of Warsaw, but I think you will be also supporting him. There will be upcoming meetings in Brussels, and we also agreed that the engagement at the European nations, both in the stocktake and other processes, is extremely important, as you have heard from Timmermans. And for example, this discussion, regional climate weeks, for example, traditionally they are mandated for always to the global south, because they are a legacy of the clean development mechanism, which is an investment from the north to the south. But we are aware climate action debates at the national and European level is also needed. We are hoping that there will be this engagement of European cities and regions in this process more often, and especially with this G7 connection. Let's keep this discussion open, and in the debates part, there may be some feedbacks from our partners. Maybe once again important, the next ministerial meeting will be at the Petersburg Dialogue. This is the traditional meetings that is hosted by the German government. This will be in 22 and 3rd of May, and I have this time nominated myself into this dialogue because of my proximity to this participation, and I think we could also build this also in relation to what we'll be preparing for daring cities and onwards. So let's continue. And Councillor Gillard is with us. So stock take. Let's dig into details. First of all, what is the legal mandate? So there's one thing for that we should be aware of. It's not anymore that we come up with a genius idea and then deliver such events. No, we have a legal mandate. First of all, we have been recognized that importance of all levels of government in the Paris Agreement. preamble. Preamble is important because it encompasses all paragraphs of the Paris Agreement. Let's not forget, this is always in our rule, the number one legal mandate. Second, in 2021, with the Glasgow Climate Pact, we have a reference to multi-level action, which means that we have to formulate what it means. And this type of engagements are concretely the opportunities. Third, in June 2022, the UNFCCC negotiators, when they first started to talk about global stocktake, there was not an idea of to have this kind of discussions at the local and national level. It was LGMA inputs, our submissions, our dialogues in the corridors, in the official processes that convinced them to agree on paragraph 6, which now encourages that this global stocktake is not anymore at the UN meetings in Bonn or Sharm el-Sheikh or Dubai, but they should be receiving inputs from local and national level. And of course, local and national level for us, it includes local and subnational and regional, all levels of governments to be able to do that. Over the past months, we have not been able to clarify what it means, but here's now what we will be taking towards how we can formulate this. And let's also remember, it's not the first time we're having this. In the 2018, the year 2018, we had a similar discussion with the Talanoa dialogues. It was again a one-off event originally, but we pushed for it and they opened the space. We had fantastic opportunities, 60 sessions in 40 countries, and this was really first time we were able to connect with the national governments. In fact, this was a building block, paving the way to Glasgow, where we had more ambitious NDCs. Still better, should be better, but it was much better than what was in 2015. So in that regard, when we communicate this to our members, like councillors, local governments, of course, now they will never have such an engagement because just it is agreed by the UNFCCC. We have to tell our constituency why, what, and how. Why, in the sense that the way community engagement is important for national and climate and global climate emergency action, as Councillor Gilliland has mentioned, we have to prove that decisions adopted by councils or actions by communities is as equally important as individual big private companies or individual national governments. Second, it is really time. What should we discuss here? We should discuss about our national plans. We should discuss about 2030, 2050 commitments of our administrations or our communities. Are we involved in that? Are we really contributing in this implementation? Is there gaps that we can address this? And we should address climate justice more and more. And how? It should be hosted at the city halls. The city halls is time to turn them into a mini COP. And the logic is that it's not anymore that we expect from the COP. The real implementation will come from the local and national level. And that is exactly the spirit of the Paris Agreement. And therefore, maybe starting from this experience, we can start to think about a new way of multi-level action, which is every year, councils are focusing a debate on global action, climate action, SDGs, whatever, so that in addition to their local agendas, councils should also be able to discuss this. They can invite the administrations to report what has happened, and they can encourage their communities to be part of this process, so that then through our pavilion, through our LGMA submissions, we can inform, so that the UNFCCC is able to really feel what's going on the ground and how the national action can be empowered. Again, the format could be a half a day or 1 day event focusing on these 3 topics. Your commitments as our homework. Did your city declare a climate emergency? Has your administration defined a climate action plan for 2030, 2035? Mitigation and adaptation. This should be now clearly visible and much more concretely monitored. Second, what is the national plan? Are we aware of it? Are they talking to us? Can we make it much more effectively synergized? And can we influence the next one coming up in the next couple of years? And the third, what does climate justice mean for our urban disadvantaged communities, urban poor? Are they part of our efforts? Do they feel the benefit of this transition to a low carbon economy? Are they feeling part of the journey? and are they receiving the benefits, and how we can get their inputs from local business to scientists to academia into this process. And especially for the global north, how can we address climate justice, that this is not anymore a debate between our national governments, but communities. We have seen these experiences in the way we have challenged the global inequalities, be it apartheid, be it solidarity with the poverty across the world. We can do this again at the local level, that climate justice, climate emergency can be going hand in hand. And the simple format: where are we, where do we want to go, how do we get there? Where are we is very simple. We can easily do it with a desktop research, but the debate should be focusing on how do we get there, and then we could focus on, after the meeting, how do we get there in terms of what mechanisms we need, and then we can report to the UNFCCC. Again, 22nd of April, especially in the US, is very important. 22nd of April is the World Mother Earth Day, but also the celebration of the Earth Day in 1972. We are aware several US cities will be stepping up to have the first examples. Earth Day Network is also helping us to show that once we have this, probably we will be much easier to communicate to other cities and regional governments to replicate this success. We would like to feed this to the UN Bonn discussions in June, and from then onwards, we would hope that there will be multiple agendas coming up. Let me give one example. In the Talanoa dialogues in June in Bonn, we had 0 Talanoa dialogues to be scheduled at the local level. By the time we reached to Katowice, we had 60 sessions convened. The more people are aware of it, they could definitely host this. And we are already aware, as I said, Miami, New Hampshire, New York City, Utrecht, they have all are scheduled themselves to prepare for it. And I'm very confident that the more we make it easily understood by our local leaders, and it could be much easily implemented. Again, we are suggesting that it is your local community, be it with the youth, be it with the parliamentarians, local business, trade unions, that they should be part of this debate. Therefore, we encourage the city hall and the administrations to take the lead, but they can ask support from ICLE, Committee of the Regions, CMR, C40, but they should feel responsibility of that, and they should report this, and the partners of the LGMA can help them to moderate these events and report them back. We're getting to the close to our session so that we can have like a 15 minutes break, the dialogue. We would like to remind once again that we have kicked off our expressions of interest for the COP28 multi-level action pavilion. My colleagues will share with you the link, so please feel free to indicate your interest so that we shape, as you have heard from Councillor Gilliland, our presence in the Blue Zone is still very important, and we will believe it will be much better than ever. I will not go to the agenda for the next couple of weeks, but I would invite now Ingrid to share with us what is going on in the biodiversity space, especially with the Ramsar Convention. I will stop sharing my screen because Ingrid has one slide, but at the end we will converge all these slides as well. I'm stopping my...
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. And while I get my slide up, I must just apologize. I'm unable to activate my video. There is something going on. Can you see the slide?
Yeah, we see it.
Okay, well, that's good news, but you can't see me, which is not a great loss. Okay. All right. So just very quickly, there's 2 really exciting things happening this year. The Convention on Migratory Species has a COP, which is taking place at the end of this year. They've just recently announced that. It is going to be in Uzbekistan from 23 to 28 October. And this is the first year where we're going to see some activity in terms of cities. So that's a really exciting in development. But then probably more sort of topical, I think, given all the extreme weather events and the flooding and things, Ramsar has invited ICLE. Some of you may know that ICLE serves on the City Wetland Accreditation Independent Advisory Committee as co-chair. and they've invited us to participate in a meeting, a roundtable of mayors that's taking place in Amiens, France, from 8 to 10 June. And this is particularly important because wetlands serve as important sinks that can help cities, alleviate the impacts of flooding. So there's going to be a whole lot of awareness raising around wetlands and their role, not just as important biomes and ecosystem habitats, but also their co-benefits from the perspective of providing clean water and also helping with flooding. So those are the two big ones. And then just the last point that I wanted to make is that the intersessional meetings of the CBD COP will be taking place in October, but we haven't got any further details about that yet. Thanks, Eunice.
Thanks, Ingrid. As you have mentioned, the wetlands are really important agendas, especially in relation to the floods. Loss and damage could also be important, and of course adaptation, where we are very actively involved. And it's, I'm very happy both regions for and Committee of the Regions who have been working on adaptation submission are also joining us here, so that we can incorporate both the preparation and the outcomes of these processes and link to the COP, UNFCCC COP as well. I now see a couple of inputs coming up from the chat box. So I also would like to encourage anyone who would like to share their insights into the agenda that we discussed, or the feedbacks from Councillor Gilliland about her experience. Feel free to comment or share, but you can also upload additional information. I now already read Anthony from WWF that you are interested on the stock take. Definitely, especially this should be a one planet network. Could be an important opportunity. Definitely, Anthony, let's work on that. And Carl is sharing his link to the paper. Excellent. If you're having a community event, I mean, the logic would be, the invitation could be that any community event could be contributing to the stock take process. Let's keep this in mind, and definitely let's hear your outcomes. Is there any contribution from any other partners? It could also be any points that we missed. There's a question in the chat box about the city halls mini COPs. Will there be any? Exactly. Actually, last week we had a webinar on we have a guidance toolkit on that front, and in the afternoon session my colleague Kale will also be able to join us. So we have around 20 pages of a guideline, the documentation kit, which can help you to track how you can organize these events, be it the stakeholder engagement modality and others. Let me just turn off my microphone so that I can put this into chat box, because I think we didn't share this. Just a second. So while talking to it, I will try to find that again. It was actually in the March webinar, March bulletin. I will go to that one. The link to this guideline, or let's say toolkit. Yep, I found it. I will put the link here. Yep. Yep, I shared in the chat box link. Again, this is also open for improvements, and we believe it gives a basic understanding of how you can mobilize for this kind and mobilization. We have 5 more minutes to go. Councillor Gilliland, is there any final remarks would you like to share? Maybe you can again guide us about how Committee of the Regions and your engagement will be in the next couple of weeks and months.
Yeah, I'm shadow rapporteur to the Mayor of Warsaw, who was also he was part of the delegation COP27 last year, but unfortunately had to leave after, I think it was the second day we were there because of an airstrike in Poland. I think one of the things, and I know that Teresa is on the call, that we said we really should do post COP27 was connect more with the European Commission, the European Parliament. And Franz Timmermans' comment to us as part of the media briefing when we raised the matter, like where are we at with regard to the inclusion of the LGMA constituency in more formally in the UNFCCC process, that he would consider it. And I think perhaps there's an onus on us now to set up a meeting with him to have that conversation about how we can extend it. And also, given his red line around mitigation, how we can support that. So maybe there's a mutual benefit there for both of us. So I think that's perhaps a piece of work for us at Committee of the Regions level and our delegation going forward, and to start that conversation early as opposed to late. Then we're also conscious of the two presidencies, the current Swedish presidency and the incoming president, around what their particular themes might be going forward. And I'm not sure if it's out yet. Not this COP, the next COP, I think, is coming back to Europe. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, it will be coming to Eastern Europe.
Eastern Europe, that perhaps
could be, or even possibility for former Soviet Republic like Kazakhstan.
Okay, yeah, that we would, once we knew that we would meet with them, because knowing that each COP has a theme, and last year it was youth, that perhaps we could get in early and persuade them that the LGMA sector would be a good theme, particularly then that will allow them to build up in the climate and urbanization ministerial and have something really concrete, and particularly post the global stocktake that I anticipate will identify and work to our advantage, that, you know, a huge amount of the actions is taking place at local level, but that the finance and the capacity building, that was something I emphasized in my contributions, that it's not just money to implement actions, it was access to expertise and to build up local capacity, human resources at local level that would be able to act hand in hand with communities, particularly when it came to adaptation and the impact of loss and damage.
Excellent. I would just like to, I see Carlos from FMDV also commenting, but while encouraging him to take the floor if he wants, one point about your point, Councillor, by the way, while talking, I'm going to the first part of my presentation. You may have not so that it is the case of Kelimane, exactly the case that he is left out of a connection and when the disaster hits, and he says that I need support, and if I am not supported, how can I help the other communities who look to me to help them? And I think that's a fantastic case, that the support in terms of these disasters should come earlier, should be much more, not a reactive but preventive, but also that we have to be much more innovative. And maybe on that, your point about the Commissioner Timmermans, there is a question of trust in the negotiations. Let's be realistic. The more they want China to commit, China always says that you have to do more. And if you look at climate action tracker, let's say, let's put the pin to ourselves. The EU commitments are still below the level that it should be. Maybe in the, I mean, we are very happy with the 55 commitments, but it could be more. And there are so many documents that the local commitments from the Covenant of Mayors and others, if they had been incorporated to the EU, the commitment of EU could have been much more higher. So maybe during the stocktake discussions, for the next NDC of EU, we can use this as at least an announcement from the European delegation representatives that when they design the next EU commitment, this time they will take into account what are the European cities, what have they been achieved, and how they can also be connected to national. If he can commit to such a dialogue before COP28 and then reach to Dubai saying that, look, my condition for you to put more ambition was a condition for the loss and damage. I did my job. I am having this discussion. I expect similar things to you. Then we can continue to do loss and damage funding and that. So let's really use the engagement of local and regional government as a bridge to build trust, and that leadership from G7 or others could also be putting forward saying that, look, we are trying to do our homework. It's not just always we ask from you. Again, what we have happening in the Commission's initiatives like Mission or Japanese cities or the US, the initiatives that will come next couple of weeks, it will be important to make them publicly available in the UN documents as well. Carlos, you have your hand raised. I think we still can have a couple of minutes if people are interested, but I believe this discussion is important. So, Carlos, please go ahead.
Well, yeah, sorry, thank you. No, I was just commenting in the chat about the conversation we had at the end of COP last year about the LGMA pavilion status and visibility, and how we could transform this into a more focal space for partners and even the delegations coming from the different countries, to ensure that we have time enough to make them engage in concrete topics, but in closed meetings, not specifically on open meetings. I mean, somehow we don't need that many meetings with an audience, etc., but more exchanges, experience, expertise between the delegations as a key moment in the day. It cannot be, all days with a specific topic, but at least having these continental discussions, having these countries in the same region discussions, having time to really meet. I think that there was, we tested some initiatives last year, and it really worked well. People were really happy. And the amount of expertise, of experience was somehow more relevant for the delegations that came to COP than the events where they publicize and advocate, etc. That's not, of course, putting the blame on the sessions we need, huh?
Yeah.
But just to see that these moments are key. And reflecting on what Councillor Gilliland was saying about the ministerial, maybe we should have in the program of the LGMA Pavilion, depending on the topics of the COP days by the presidency, have a one moment, very high level moment, where we would convene business community, industry community, finance community, with a very high level convening agenda, and then to move from the pavilion to a specific room afterwards. I don't know, to connect the two of them, but to have the pavilion as a very, very visible space, something that where that you will find there the people who work at the local level, etc., in a different way, to sell the pavilion in a different way. But of course it depends on the space. Obviously it depends on the shape of the pavilion. Many issues I know ICLEI has been trying to solve in the past years, but we need, as you said previously, 2,000 people, 7,000 people, 30,000 people at COPs. We need to reframe a little bit our interventions, and making sure that the pavilion serves for the constituency as putting it in on the map, on the real map of the players that you need to work with. It's just, we can think of many ways, and we're thinking, and we'll discuss this later, on creating somehow a localizing climate finance hub within the pavilion as a magnet. That's the thing. Let's make the pavilion a magnet. Yeah. But we need to reflect on that.
Exactly. And maybe Carlos, thanks a lot. Kata, I think I remember I shared with you the link for the COP28 Pavilion expressions of interest links, if you can share that in the chat box.
I did. Should I share again?
Yeah, it would be good. It doesn't hurt if you can share
Okay.
again. It might have
Yes.
been so many things coming up. So
Mhm.
Carlos, we have started to receive inputs about how we can make the pavilion better, more effective. So feel free to express those ideas into this form so that we can collectively, as you said, shape it. We are hearing that Scottish government will continue to support to a certain extent. We don't know. We hope that the presidency will help us to deal with this financial also element, because it's a huge financial challenge. And meanwhile, we advance how we can make innovative use, and of course the space is up to us. It's our space. We can shape as much as we want. So please reflect this, and we start planning ahead. By the time we reach to June, we hope to have more clarifications on the pavilion, and we want to use this momentum to start planning earlier. And Carl, I saw you have mentioned about the OECD event with EU on 20th of April. I wasn't aware of it. It's Committee of the Regions and OECD. Maybe Committee of the Regions colleagues have more information and they can send us later on. But we can follow up further. What we know, as far as I know, that there will be a debate in May from the Committee of the Regions, and we will include this in our calendar as well. So I think with this, we reached to a relative saturation, and I see some people are already starting to leave. I don't want to keep long, but I think that was for us now an opportunity to hear from each other, our experiences and some brainstorming. And we will stay in touch via our mailing list, our WhatsApp group, and also the bulletin. So stay tuned, and many thanks for all your contributions, especially to Councillor Gilliland today, not just for Copenhagen, but also today reserving her time and sharing her insights with us. Of course, my colleague Ingrid and all the team inside ICLE who is supporting this process, but also participants of the LGMA who make this rich discussion and make sure that we are much more bold and ambitious towards COP28. Thank you and have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.